It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, Sky News reveals that Sir Keir Starmer has received substantially more freebies than any other MP since he became the Labour leader. Over the last 4.5 years, he has received more than £100,000 worth of gifts, benefits and hospitality, including thousands on tickets for football matches and a Taylor Swift concert. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates will take us through how it all adds up in the latest league table from our Westminster Accounts project. Also ahead, far-right thuggery or a symptom of a broken system. We have a special report for you from Hull on the simmering anger after last month's riots, and we'll ask what needs to change. Plus, some of London's statues get a wardrobe update. We'll hear from one of the campaigners who has written to the Prime Minister calling for better paternity leave. And the Welsh cricket team hoping for the Hollywood treatment. We'll be joined by the boss of Welsh Fire, who's in talks with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. All that to come, much more, here on the UK Tonight. Well, all of that to come in just a moment, but first, let's bring you an update on the developing story in Lebanon this evening. The Lebanese Health Ministry saying that 14 people have died and 450 others wounded in a second wave of exploding communication devices in Lebanon. Well, witnesses today say walkie-talkies used by the Hezbollah militant group exploded just a day after 12 people were killed and thousands more injured by exploding pagers. These blasts were heard during a funeral this afternoon for the victims of yesterday's pager attack. Israel has said tonight that a new phase has begun in this war in the Middle East. Well, let's bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, because over the last 48 hours, Deborah, what's going on in the Middle East has taken a very unexpected turn. Where are we at this point? Because there have been more developments today, the second wave of attack unfolding this afternoon.
Yeah, so it's unprecedented and incredibly unconventional, the kind of attacks that we saw happen yesterday with these exploding pagers, the discovery that most likely these pagers had been turned into remote bombs by being tampered with beforehand and then detonated all at the same time in this very coordinated, sophisticated attack that Hezbollah has blamed on Israel. And then more than 24 hours later, as you said, a similar attack happening with these sort of handheld radios that can be used as walkie-talkies, again, seeming as though they've been turned into bombs and detonated. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied involvement. But as you said, it's now saying that there's a new phase in the war. It will be shifting its focus to the north, the northern border with Lebanon. And the big question, though, is, assuming that this is Israel and all the signs and indicators are that Israel was behind this very unconventional form of warfare, is this some kind of, just a sort of a signal to Hezbollah to stop launching rockets over the border into Israel so that the Israeli communities that have been impacted can return? Or, and this is what is maybe more likely, is this a precursor to some kind of further, more conventional military action? And then the other question you have to say is, how is Hezbollah going to respond? They have been deeply weakened by this. Their communication channels have been absolutely compromised. And all the while, Iran, Hezbollah's chief backer, we're watching on, and how will they react?
OK, Deborah, thank you, Deborah Haynes, keeping across that developing story for us tonight here on Sky News. Thanks, Deborah. Well, tonight Sky News can reveal that the Prime Minister has received substantially more freebies than any other MP since 2019. 2.5 times more than the next MP, in fact. It adds up to more than £100,000 worth of gifts, benefits and hospitality. Sir Keir Starmer accepted more than £35,000 worth of tickets to see football games alone. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates has been digging into the numbers as part of our Westminster Accounts project.
The Westminster Accounts is a major collaboration between Sky News and partners, Tortoise Media, which tracks how money flows through our political system, and now overhauled for the new political era and the new government. This man is at the helm, and he's promising he's different to his predecessors. He must declare everything he received, and he has received a lot. Over £107,000. That's the total gifts and hospitality he has registered since the start of the last Parliament. Holidays, theatre, football tickets, all within the rules, Downing Street say. But look at this. Compared to every other current MP, Keir Starmer comes top of the charts. He has accepted freebies by far more than anyone else. 2.5 times more than the second highest MP. Now, this table here is the top 10 MPs have accepted the most in gifts, excluding legal fees. And these are who gave the most gifts and hospitality to Keir Starmer. Wealthy donors, sports firms, music companies, media giants. And this was, Keir Starmer said, a swift campaign stop. And it was an expensive one. Tickets to Taylor Swift at Wembley, gifted to him and worth £4,000. Now, the source of those tickets are another of the PM's top donors of freebies, the Premier League. Over 12.5 grand's worth of tickets to Taylor Swift and a lot of football, including the Euros final. These are far and away not the only games the PM has accepted freebies to see. Look at this. Keir Starmer has accepted over £35,000 worth of football tickets alone since the 2019 election. And some in government are worrying to me that with big decisions on a football regulator being made, there's a conflict of interest, and accepting these gifts could be a problem. One official told me Sue Gray should be putting a stop to this. But the Prime Minister is not rowing back. He said to journalists just this week, if I don't accept gifts of hospitality, I can't go to a game. You could say, well, bad luck. That's why gifts have to be registered. But, you know, never going to an Arsenal game again because I can't accept hospitality is pushing it a bit far. Some in Labour are asking me why he can't just pay for the tickets himself. Now, I've learnt that Keir Starmer was warned while he was in opposition that his openness to freebies could become a problem. But he didn't listen. And some of his biggest supporters are beginning to worry. Demands for a tighter political grip in Number 10 are now common across the party, revealing frustrations at his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, who we now believe is paid more than the Prime Minister himself. Not the backdrop the Prime Minister wants to his first conference in government.
Well, let's bring in Sam for more on this. Sam, all very awkward, as you outlined there, but you did also say that he hasn't broken any rules. This is the system. He's registered all of this. So essentially, he's done nothing wrong, but it doesn't look great, does it? So on that front, just how serious could this be for Sir Keir Starmer?
Look, I think it's been a pretty bleak day inside Number 10. A lot of Labour folk that I talk to are quite worried. Worried about this, worried about the sheer scale of freebies. There is concern actually about potential conflict of interest, as I was outlining over specifically about football. But it speaks to a bigger truth. Because what Labour MPs know, and Labour supporters of Keir Starmer know, is that this is going to be hammered by the Tories. So before we go any further, let's watch one Tory, Tom Tugendhat, who's one of the leadership contenders, doing precisely that with Sophie Ridge. Here we go.
You know, I've been invited to many different events and different moments, and, you know, you've got to make a decision. Does it look right? Does it smell right? Does it pass the sniff test, frankly? And to be number one in that ranking does raise some questions.
Do you think it passes the sniff test, then?
I think it raises questions.
Well, I think there'll be that and a lot more from the Tories. But I think the question that Labour folk are asking is Downing Street dropping too much of the politics? Are they messing up too many different issues? One story that's dominating tonight as well is it's emerged that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, is paid more than the Prime Minister himself, Keir Starmer. She's believed to be on about 170, the Prime Minister on about 155,000. Big sums. Odd, though, for it to be that way round. That's an uncomfortable position at a time where pensioners are losing their winter fuel allowance, that such big sums are paid to advisors. More generally, I think that there is a concern that narrowly, Sue Gray hasn't got enough political experience to try and stop embarrassing stories like both of those from dominating the airways for hours and days. And I think there's a lot of desire in the Labour Party for a sign that Number 10 is going to take a greater political grip on events before more things go wrong.
OK, Sam, thank you. Sam Coates there reflecting on the latest batch of his Westminster accounts. Now, for more than a week over the summer, thousands of people took to the streets night after night as riots swept across the country. Shops were looted, cars burnt, and mosques and hotels housing asylum seekers attacked. The Prime Minister described the violence as far-right thuggery. But, as our national correspondent Tom Parmenter has been finding out, for some of those involved, that feels like a failure to grasp what they say was really behind it all. Tom has been speaking to people in Hull and has this special report.
There was anger, racism and chaos. What happened on the 3rd of August in Hull horrified people in this city as much as anywhere else. Rioters hunting down people who didn't look like them. As we saw in other towns and cities, the mob surrounded a hotel in central Hull that's housing asylum seekers. The Prime Minister described it as far-right thuggery, but we've spoken to many people here who say there was far more at play. The men who filmed this agreed to meet us. They wanted to explain why they were there on the fringes of a riot. Hi lads. Hiya. How are you? I'm Tom. Yeah.
Sit down. He keeps the rats very, very useful. I've got a room through there, but I sleep in here. That's what I sleep on. Right, okay. He got bit by a rat. That was the thing. Did he? Oh, I touched my nose. His nose. 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
What, while you were asleep?
Yeah. I felt this pain and I woke up. There's a rat attached to my nose. There's the rat poisons. They were full 2 days ago.
They say they've tried to move out, but are stuck in this nightmare. There's just rats everywhere.
Just rats everywhere. I mean, look at it. It's a playground for rats around here. We were there, watching it all.
What did you make of it when you were watching it?
Deserved. Get rid of them. I just think it's wrong. Because I know a lot of people are on the streets and stuff, you know, and it's not right. They're not getting the help they deserve, but they just come here illegally and get everything they want. It's not right. But when it's taking away all our necessary needs, hospitals, dentists, hotels, this, housing, everything, it's just...
Oscar and James say they were there documenting what was happening in their city, but did not get involved.
But you kind of look at me like, you know, I've got a problem with immigrants. I don't have a problem with immigrants. I have a problem with the system.
But quite a few people on that, in that moment, really did. And it was direct, and people of colour were being attacked and chased.
Yes.
And that's overt racism.
Yeah, and I get it, yeah. I get it. But the thing is people get carried away in a moment, you know.
Do you think racism was a motivator for at least some of the people there?
The minority it was, and I think for the majority it was just frustration. I believe they just wanted to, you know, to kick back at the people that are in here. You know, I don't think everybody thinks like me and goes, God bless them, they've got a problem too. Because they have got problems. Yeah. They've been through hell. They've been through war zones and this, that and the other, you know. And I think people at the time just felt a lot of anger, a lot of frustration that, like, you know, there's people living on the streets that are British born and are not getting looked after. I look at the pain in people's eyes sometimes and you just think to yourself, you think, don't you, what the hell? What's going on?
You two watch this a lot.
Yeah, constantly. I mean, he's got like 650,000 followers. I wake up to it because, I mean, because of the rat problem, like I said, we don't sleep.
They watch YouTube channels that are built around the immigration debate.
Here we go. Churches burned down across Europe.
To them, mainstream news has become irrelevant.
Katie Price turning up at court. Yeah, Katie Price turning up at court. Amazing. Like, is this? And that was on the BBC. This ain't news. Like, I give a flying.
So this is your corner of Hull.
This is one of them.
Oscar wants us to meet Donna, who sits most days outside a nearby shop. She used to have her own cleaning business before her life fell apart.
We're not looked after. I don't feel safe. And I don't feel safe. And this is in my own country. Terrible. It really is awful.
The problem of finding somewhere decent to live is a recurring theme. Where will you sleep tonight?
Under the bridge. I'll show you where I stay from. This is my bedroom. Just sits everywhere. Our country should be looking after us, not other people's problems. It's not. They want to sort their own problems out first, and this is one of them.
Along the Analyse road, we met Danny and Lisa.
Good afternoon, Adept.
They're busy, juggling vulnerable people and not enough decent housing.
A lot of people thought it was far-right agitators whipping things up.
Well, no, why? Not everybody was in that riots for the same reason. There'll have been people in that riots because they are homeless, they haven't had help. But that doesn't make them racist. They just wanted to get their point across.
Danny has been homeless himself. As a younger man, he served time for violent offences.
If they've got drug problems, mental health problems, even just living on the street, it's a war every day for them. So I get what they're saying, that they're fleeing wars, but I was fighting a daily war. So
You think it's that desperate?
Yeah.
Feels like a war.
Yeah.
We have about 25 tenants and we just have to share them out who's more in need, really. You do get these coming across and they're getting in hotels and they're getting fed 3 times a day. Ours probably can't eat sometimes once a day.
And it needs solving.
It does need solving, yeah, definitely. But will it? That's the problem, isn't it?
The food bag was heading to Carl, who was trying to get back on his feet.
The police came along, I was homeless on the streets, no help or anything. It's been a hard battle.
Carl is focusing on his own recovery, but can see why others felt compelled to take to the streets.
You shout so loud, can't you, and they don't listen. You know, just one of those things, isn't it? It boils over sometimes.
Because some of these communities don't feel like happy places at the minute.
No, they're not. There's a lot of tension in the air, there's a lot of aggression, a lot of animosity. It's not always just down to one person in particular or down to the government per se. It just causes stress throughout. You know, I have my own battles every day, do you know what I mean?
That tension and animosity that Carl talked about is at the heart of this. It's a byproduct of successive UK governments failing to control immigration. Yes, racism was a thread that ran through these riots, but it's also true that there are deprived communities across Britain where people feel ignored and forgotten. And they keep coming through Danny and Lisa's door.
Chaos in it, to be fair. But it is down to the government to sort it. There's only them who can. And the only way, in my eyes, they'll do it is that they give them equal opportunities. If they're going to allow them, then so be it. But please look after ours as well. Otherwise, it'll just continue, and it will.
Do you think it could kick off again?
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. Yeah. But I don't blame it for kicking off. I don't blame it at all.
Many of those who rioted in Hull are now starting long prison sentences. But the wounds remain open, and the roots of these riots run deep.
Well, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter is in the studio with me now, along with lawyer Liz Ward, founder of Adapt Resettlement, the organisation you saw there in Tom's report. Liz, thank you for coming in to see us. Tom, just having been to Hull and talked to the people there about what happened this summer, the reasons behind it are so complex. It's not just to do with immigration. As one of the men you interviewed said, one of the gentlemen, he said, we don't feel like we're getting looked after.
No, and there is a sense of real injustice that you find in Hull and in many other towns and cities, others that rioted and others that didn't. This isn't unique to Hull by any stretch of the imagination. Let's be really clear. The racism that was on display in the summer riots was repugnant, it was shameful, and there were far-right agitators involved in whipping things up and pushing it. But there were also people who were involved or were part of the spectacle who subscribe to this view that there is an injustice that they live with daily, that they see around them daily in their communities up around Britain. And there is a simmering anger at the heart of this. And the authorities have been quite unequivocal. We know the courts and the police have cracked down really hard. The police in Hull have said that there's just no justification for this. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has said that this was not protest. This is thuggery. Well, it is thuggery, but it is also a statement from a lot of people who feel unheard.
Yeah, Liz, this must be something that you have heard all over the summer, and you will hear, in the coming months, that it was an outlet for people's frustration. It wasn't necessarily linked to racism, but for many people, it was a case of, hang on a second, people coming into the country illegally are being looked after. I can't even get a home. I can't afford to feed myself. Again, it comes back to that phrase, and that's the one phrase that stood out for me from that report that I kept thinking over and over again. We're not getting looked after. And they don't necessarily want hands out. They just want to be able to have a hand up.
Well, indeed, they want to be recognised, don't they? But, the old adage, charity begins at home, I think, applies here. And people are thinking that charity is not beginning at home. We're entertaining all these people from overseas. We're not questioning the fact that they're here for years, quite often, on benefits. They're not economically active. That's actually not very good for them either. And so the whole thing's kind of got blown up in that kind of hysteria, and I understand it. Yeah. There's a tension there, but people are also tense about cost of living issues. They're tense about the fact that, they feel a bit hopeless at the moment because, jobs are more difficult to come by, skills are changing, life is changing before them, and they're just not feeling supported. And I see that, and I see that so much amongst the homeless community who do feel that they have to fight for everything. We try and support people. We do support people very well, but, we've got limited resources to do that, and it's a hard task. For the taxpayer, it's good value for money because it keeps people out of prison, stops them from offending, it keeps them out of hospitals, it keeps them from needing and absorbing far more resources. So to me, supported accommodation makes a lot of sense. But, the tenants in our project sometimes see immigrants coming over here in a hotel, 3 meals a day. They're not being questioned, as our tenants are, about whether or not they're entitled to a food parcel.
That's not necessarily racism, it's a sense of injustice. As Tom said,
Yeah.
What happened in the riots, you can't justify that. Whatever the reasons were for those people going out on the streets and acting as they did, there is no justification for that. But there is space for a considered conversation that isn't us versus them, that isn't talking about immigration in terms of stop the boats. Because, Liz, you and I were chatting before we came on air that immigration should be talked about more in terms of its positive aspects as well, to sort of counteract all of the vitriol that happens around immigration as well.
Well, in the last 25, 30 years that I've been working, I've seen lots of positive effects of immigration. We've got lots of skills over here that we wouldn't otherwise have. We're able to recruit from a global market. We've got entrepreneurs. We've got money that's come to this country. We've got innovation that's come to this country because we've had a fairly kind of open policy to people from overseas. I think where the injustice comes in is where you see illegal migration, illegal immigration into the UK, and people
that's not being dealt with.
It's not being dealt with. It's not dealt with, and it's dismissed by people. It's dismissed, and it's that's frankly insulting.
Because Tom, that's the issue, isn't it? People see this immigration problem, people coming into the country, and as you've both explained, they feel hard done by because they're not being given homes when they desperately need them or the support they need, yet people come into the country illegally are. But as I just said, they're not being dealt with. And again, that comes back to government, doesn't it? And this whole problem of the immigration needs to be dealt with. People, need to be allowed to have jobs, to stay, be sent back. That needs to be sorted out for there to be some sort of movement in this.
That's one of the things that really struck me, spending quite a lot of time in Hull over the last week, speaking to Danny, who was in that office trying to get people into decent accommodation. He said the government laid this bomb and now it's exploded. And the failure to really implement change in immigration policy that people can see is transparent and fair and allows people who are in genuine need to find sanctuary if they want it. And it's something that the failure of that, I think, is at the very heart of this, because it's led to a lot of discontent and a lot of anger and jealousy and animosity. And that's not a good place for any community.
And Liz, can we end on a more positive note? Because, you know, as we've talked about, the government isn't solving this immigration problem. So those illegal people coming and being left in limbo, you know, people feeling that they're getting handouts when they're not. But they're not being helped by the government. But, you know, the people of Hull, you know, and up and down the country aren't being helped either.
It's a problem, and I think the thing that always strikes me about Hull, as I mentioned to Tom earlier on, what a great place to do business. You've got a really willing workforce there who are looking for jobs. You've got people who are loyal, who want to work. You know, why isn't there more levelling up in Hull? Why isn't there more care of the population, generally speaking? And I'm hopeful that that will come in due course. At the moment, we just have a battle on our hands trying to find accommodation and support for homeless people.
Well, Liz, keep up the fight for Hull, and we're shining a spotlight on it tonight. Liz Ward, thank you, founder there of Adapt Resettlement, the organisation that was part of Tom's special report, and Tom Parmenter, our national correspondent, thank you. I'm going to talk now to Miqdad Versi, beg your pardon, from the Muslim Council of Britain. You were listening to our conversation there, Miqdad, and Liz touched on social cohesion, and that was such a central part of the riots. Yes, we talk about the racism and the misinformation that led to riots and it being, you know, overtaken by far-right thuggery, but somewhere in the heart of all that, there was a problem with social cohesion as well and integrating communities.
I think that the Islamophobia and the racism that embodied a large portion of the racists and the thugs who committed these riots and were involved in the violence, that shouldn't be obviously overlooked. But you're right, that there were some people who were there who had other perspectives. And I think it's really important to try and differentiate different things that are happening here. On the one hand, we actually have a story to tell about the immigrants to our communities. If you look at the statistics around what's happened, actually, migrants are a net contributor to our society. But what's happened is that some people who've been left behind, who have certain things that, you know, their public services are not being supported. The blame is being put, there are people who are putting the narrative out there that it's all migrants' fault. And what I think we have to try and distinguish between is what are the drivers for some of these, the disparity in different communities across the country? What are the reasons why some people are really struggling on the street? Is that because of migrants? Or is it actually because of broader economic policy, because of government choices that are being made? And I think that the problem is that we have certain people within media outlets, within certain political parties who want to stir up the far-right thinking on this, who want to try and make this idea that it's migrants' fault. And the statistics show the opposite. The average migrant is a net contributor to the UK. Our public services wouldn't be able to survive without the immigration that we have. So if anything that's the case, it's actually the case that we need to build a more celebration of the migrants that are coming to this country, because that's actually the reality in what's happening. And unfortunately, that narrative is not being given. We're not seeing that narrative, we're not hearing that narrative from those in leadership positions. Instead, what we hear are vacuous statements that aren't true and claims that are being made that we're going to cut immigration by this amount, when that's never going to happen, because they are the lifeblood in many respects of our public services and actually are net contributors to our society. So I think we need to have a more honest conversation. We need to celebrate the reality of what's happened, and let's recognize the narrative. Let's not allow those people who want to stir up racism, Islamophobia, hate. Don't let them drive a narrative that is migrants' fault. Let's base it on fact. Let's base it on reality. And let's try and improve the economic policy so we can support those in need rather than try and blame migrants.
Miqdad Versi, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for contributing to our conversation to my spokesperson there for the Muslim Council of Britain. Let's take you straight to the White House. Press briefing is underway. Let's listen in.
Given the rhetoric and the attacks in the last few days, it seems like a full-out conflict is inevitable at this point. Would you agree with that assessment? And is the U.S. government preparing for an evacuation of American citizens in Lebanon and or in Israel in that case?
I think we've learned through experience, particularly over now what's going on almost a year here, that nothing is inevitable when it comes to that particular part of the world and this particular conflict. And we're going to, as I said to Gabe, we're going to do everything we can to see if we can end it and get those hostages home. And your second question was evacuation. I don't have anything with respect to evacuation preparations to talk about. I mean, that's a better question really put to the State Department. I think you know, Laura, particularly from covering the Pentagon, we have on the shelf, we have evacuation plans available for places all over the world. But I wouldn't lead that to believe that we're in a moment now where we think we need to imminently call for that or act on that right now.
What has been the impact of the latest attacks on the potential for a ceasefire deal in Gaza?
I think it's too soon to know if what happened over the last couple of days is going to have any effect on where we are with a ceasefire deal. Sadly, we aren't any closer to that now than we were even a week ago. So it's difficult to see any immediate impact of these incidents. But I think it's just too soon to know in general.
Officials have said we're 90% there. Is that still the case?
I think in terms of the agreed framework and the language, that's still the case. The framework has been agreed to. The major architecture of the deal had been agreed to by both sides. But as we said, once you get down to niddling over that last 10%, and you're in that kind of horse trading, it gets real hard, and the details get real specific, and that's where we have run into some resistance, and we're not any closer today than we were a few days ago.
Thanks. CBS News, at least, has learned that the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, spoke yesterday with the Israeli Defense Minister 2 different times. We've been told no specifics were given about the operation that happened yesterday. Was there any heads up given yesterday that there would be more attacks in Lebanon today?
Well, I'd refer you to the Defense Department to speak to conversations that the Secretary had with Minister Gallant. As I said, there was no U.S. involvement in either of these incidents, and I have nothing.
One thing, though, but awareness it was coming is another.
I recognize the question. I have nothing more to add.
If you're someone who owns a pager like this that's been blown up in Lebanon in recent days, whether it was made by the Taiwanese company or the Hungarian company that may have had a licensing deal with them, should you be concerned it could blow up?
Again, Ed, I have nothing more to add on this.
Yeah. Our sources have confirmed to us it's been widely reported that Israel is responsible for this, but notably you still won't say that. Why is that? Is it because that's not your assessment or because you don't support what they're doing here?
It's because I don't have anything more to add on this issue. As I said, there was no U.S. involvement, and I'm not going to go beyond that today.
Then let me ask this. These kinds of tactics, blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies, is this type of warfare acceptable to the United States?
Again, Mary, I appreciate the question. I'm simply not going to be able to address these incidents over the last couple of days in any level of detail one way or another.
Okay, let me try one other thing.
Please.
You know, everyone keeps urging, all parties involved not to escalate this. Isn't this an escalation already? I mean, isn't this Israel doing exactly what you've been warning them not to do?
Again, I'm not going to speak to the details of these incidents. I understand that's frustrating. I get it. And I understand where all your questions are coming from. They're all valid. They're all fair. I'm just not going to get into this. I will add, if I could, and restate a little bit to what I said to Gabe. We still don't want to see an escalation of any kind. We don't believe that the way to solve where we're at in this crisis is by additional military operations at all. We still believe that the best way to prevent escalation, to prevent another front from opening up in Lebanon, is through diplomacy, which is why Mr. Hochstein was over in the region this week. And we're still going to pursue those kinds of outcomes.
If a state actor was involved in any way in what took place in Lebanon, is that acceptable behavior by a government?
Look, that's a great hypothetical, Trevor, that I'm simply not going to engage.
So it's not that's not the case that it was a state actor?
I have nothing more to add on these incidents. I understand the question. I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals or speculate about what did or didn't happen or who might be responsible.
Is there any current intelligence assessment as to who was responsible?
I'm not going to get into intelligence estimates and assessments from here either.
Secretary of State Blinken expressed frustration at the escalations and remarks earlier today, saying it threatens to slow it, to stop a ceasefire deal. Is that the White House's assessment as well, that it's close to being stopped or derailed, or?
Look, as I said earlier, I think looking at the last couple of days, it's just a little too soon to know what kind of impact those incidents are going to have in the region writ large, particularly when it comes to the tensions up at the border with Lebanon. On the ceasefire deal and trying to get both sides back to the table, we're still working at that. Nothing's changed. We're still trying to get that done. We understand that even before the incidents of the last couple of days, doing that was real hard, that there wasn't a lot of momentum to be had there or inertia. We recognize that, but we're still working to try to see if we can get that done because we still believe the best way to get those hostages home is through a negotiated arrangement. On the tensions with Lebanon, again, too soon to know what these incidents are going to mean to the already high tensions between Israel and Hezbollah up at that border, the blue line specifically. All I can tell you is even as recently as a couple of days ago, Amos Hochstein, our envoy, was in the region having discussions to do everything we can from a diplomatic perspective to prevent those tensions from escalating into all-out conflict.
One more just on Wilmington this weekend. Does the president intend to press Prime Minister Modi on human rights abuses while they're talking, one-on-one?
There's not a conversation that he has with foreign leaders where he doesn't talk about the importance of respecting human and civil rights, and that includes with Prime Minister Modi. He did when the Prime Minister was here in the United States, and I'm sure that as appropriate he'll do going forward. I'm not going to get ahead of the conversation, but he never shies away from talking about our concerns over human and civil rights anywhere in the world.
Thanks. And you said a lot of time, especially about this region, that it's very important for this administration that the rules of war or international humanitarian law is being followed. So why won't you make an assessment whether these operations that we're seeing in Lebanon indeed are in accordance with international humanitarian law?
I can appreciate that you all want answers to these questions, and you want them now. I get that. We're talking about incidents that allegedly happened today, apparently happened today, and some that happened yesterday. I'm just not going to get into intelligence assessments one way or another about this. And I would also add that, as we have said from the very beginning, Israel has a right to defend itself. How they do so matters to us, and we don't shy away from having those kinds of conversations with the Israelis as appropriate.
So you're saying Israel is behind these operations?
I did not say that.
Do you think that Israel, whoever committed this attack, is undermining U.S. efforts at avoiding an escalation in the region? And if so, what is the next move to try and prevent that from happening?
We're going to keep at the work of intense diplomacy to see what we can do to de-escalate, to try to prevent this from becoming a bigger conflict than it already has.
One more. Over the weekend, the Palestinian ministry in Gaza submitted a report with the names, IDs, ages of 34,000 people who've been killed since October 7. Over 7,000 more whose identities have not been verified. The first 14 pages of the report are babies under the age of 1, and 2 people over the age of 100. Has the White House seen that report, and do you have any comments beyond far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed in this conflict?
Let me take the question for you so I can get you back a good substantive answer. I don't know if we've seen that report. I haven't, but that doesn't mean that somebody here hasn't. So why don't you let me take that back and get you a better answer?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
On U.S. steel and Nippon Steel, the CFIUS review that's now been, delayed or extended another 90 days, can you explain a little bit why that process is taking so long, and if it signals any sort of shift in the president's thinking about concerns he's expressed about this merger?
CFIUS runs an independent process. As far as I know, there's been no delay or extension. That process is ongoing, as I understand that to be the case. Look, the president has said already what he believes that the future of U.S. steel ought to be. He's made that clear, but he also respects the CFIUS process. And again, that process is ongoing.
Thanks, Corinne. John, to what extent will China be a focus of the Quad meeting this weekend?
Well, I think it'll certainly be high on the agenda, John. I mean, there's not an opportunity when you get together with these particular leaders, the Indo-Pacific Quad.
Let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins us now. The White House press briefing there, adamant the US was not involved. He was also asked a number of other questions that he says he recognised and appreciated, but he didn't answer a lot of them. So what new information did we get there from that briefing, Mark?
Well, basically none. I mean, I was struck at how little he was willing to talk at all about what had happened. Not even willing to admit that Israel was behind it. Was the clear messaging from the White House is we had nothing to do with this, and we hope it won't impact any efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, and that it won't escalate anything on the northern border with Lebanon. But beyond that, he really said very, very little, which I think in itself is telling. I mean, he is a man treading water for now, holding the line, holding statements effectively of what you could describe what we heard there as they wait to see what happens next. I think it is the case. I would personally take what he said at face value. I do not believe that the Americans would have had anything to do with this. What we don't know is whether they were informed that it was going to happen before it did happen. And again, on that, very little indeed. But he did say that it was too soon to know if the Lebanon explosions will have an impact on the ceasefire deal. Remember, the ceasefire deal is over Gaza. It is an attempt to get the two sides, Hamas and Israel, to agree to a ceasefire which would allow hostages to be released, would create a pause and then a permanent ceasefire in terms of the fighting there, which would perhaps mean that Hezbollah in the north would stop firing rockets at Israel. So the key to all of this is a ceasefire in Gaza. But it is a very difficult ceasefire to achieve. And while it is unachievable, the pressure in the north is extreme and has only been made more extreme by what has been going on with these pagers and now walkie-talkies.
OK, Mark, thank you. Mark Stone there with the update from the United States. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. The Statue Stunt campaign to improve the government's paternity care policy. We'll bring you all details. Campaigners calling for better paternity leave here in the UK have tied baby slings on statues right across London in an attempt to raise awareness of this issue. Activists from the group The Dad Shift say the government's current paternity leave policy is the worst in Europe. The campaigners writing to the Prime Minister calling on him to take swift action on this to improve parental leave for fathers. Well, let's speak to founder of the digital community Dope Black Dads, Marvin Harrison. He joins me now. They are backing this campaign. As a result of the UK's paternity leave, research shows that 1 in 3 UK fathers took no paternity leave after the birth of their child. Dads are finding that this just doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's absolutely problematic. Like, if you think about a family dynamic, we are still very in tune with the fact that dads are the majority of the major breadwinner in the family. And as a result, it's over-indexing on them to focus on that particular area. And with policies like our UK paternity leave, that not only perpetuates it, but it will keep it going for generations to come. It's incredibly important that we address this now, because there is a generation of fathers that are very passionate and desperate to make this change. We want to be present, active, loving, and supportive, not only of the mothers of our children, but also our children themselves, and be there in those early stages to ensure that we're building real connection and affinity to our children, so that actually has a greater impact on their well-being later on down the line.
And do you feel you've got a Prime Minister at the moment who understands this? Because, of course, when he was running for election, he said that he wanted to spend at least a night a week with his kids, a Friday night. He wouldn't give that up for anything. And you've written to the Prime Minister. How have you laid out your case to push this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, this is the first time we've heard a leader of this country speak in terms of family. We used to be a nation that was focused on developing and supporting families, and we've kind of gone away from that. Hearing those types of things for me is what makes him human, which is why we're optimistic that not only will he hear what we need to do, but he will take it on himself and push this through to ensure that it's done to help as many dads as possible. And I will say this now, which is really important, that this affects dads across the class, race, lines. This is not a cultural divide in this. This affects all dads, and it impacts obviously families as a result. So our request to him is to take this very seriously. We've had a significant amount of support. We're getting more and more signatures as the minutes go by, and I think it's a subject that will not go away.
Marvin, do you want to inspire dads to come forward? In fact, not just dad, men to come forward, because, you know, women talk about this a lot. We talk about maternity leave. We talk about equal rights when it comes to parenting. We talk about flexible working, not just for women, but for men as well. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about equality in parenthood. Are enough men talking about this?
No, it's still in men's circles. It's still a developing conversation, and I will always thank mothers and women specifically for advocating for men and spaces for men to come into the conversation much more powerfully. But there are a lot more men's groups, a lot more podcasts, a lot more conversation and spaces where men are able to say that something isn't quite right in the early development phases of fatherhood, and we need to start looking at them. This, for me, is the biggest place to start, and it's so important that we take it not only very seriously, but treat it as an urgent matter, because we have seen what the fragment of society does. When we look at things like youth violence, when we then look at things like mental health, when we look at what's happening with young people in this country, the lack of time and connection of fathers is one of the factors that we're looking at. And I think we can do something here, and we're going to need all the support of everybody, including women and the wider community, to get this through.
Yeah, dad's just as important as mums in family life. Marvin, thank you for talking to us. I know that you're one of the signatures on this letter to the Prime Minister. When he gets in touch, come back and talk to us. Let us know what he has to say.
Absolutely, thank you.
Marvin, good to see you. Take care. Marvin Harrison, the founder of Dope Black Dads, talking about UK paternity leave, the worst in Europe. Still to come on the programme, the Welsh Cricket Club hoping for some Hollywood investment, and Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois taking part in their public workouts before their IBF World Heavyweight title clash this weekend.
Hello and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast equivalent of a Pro Plus caffeine tablet that tells you everything about what you need to know the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
My name is Jack Blanchard of Politico. With me in the Zoom call is Sam Coates of Sky News.
The front runner among the members, Kelly Badenoch, did much worse than I was expecting. Now, traditionally and historically, MPs want to rush to back early the front runner candidate because it helps your chances of getting a job further down the track. It's good to be seen to be there early with the person who's going to win. And the fact that even though she was topping a lot of the surveys, that she didn't get more than 6 votes behind Robert Jenrick is very ominous for her campaign.
This issue had sort of bubbled away a bit last week. It was always going to come back this week because of the vote, but it was rather blown up again on Thursday due to a very prominent Labour Party commentator wading in on it and saying that Rachel Reeves might need an escape route. Now, that person was Ed Balls, who used possibly one of the most prominent Labour figures to speak about Treasury matters.
Oh my God.
What happened?
Sorry, I've got my cat is fighting another cat through the window. I'm going to have to stop it.
There's a cat fight.
They have breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Well, it's sportastic to the end of the programme. We're going to talk about the Welsh Cricket Club, who could soon be getting some very famous faces investing in their team. But first, we can get all the sport now with Teddy.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
We were both so excited to see each other as these little characters in a kid's book. It was brilliant, and we spent a lot of time laughing about doing it. You know, the book is two young lads, Kevin and Rob, exploring what heroes mean to them, and to have something that's physical that we completed together, and for it to be the last thing we did, which is such a positive thing as well, is great. And I know little Jackson Burrow, who's 5, has had this book read to him about 100 times and loves it.
Can you try and elaborate a little bit on your relationship and why that bond was so special?
We sat next to each other for 15 years in dressing rooms. You know, Rob was maybe 18 and I was 20, and both trying to make our way. Probably 300 days a year we sat in that dressing room and we chatted of some sort every day, albeit very, very different with Rob because he's crackers and he was crackers. I was there right at the start when Rob was diagnosed. And I think you have a choice to make as a friend. You're either going to be there with somebody or you're not. And it was a really easy decision for me and many of our teammates, I must say, to be there for him. You learn a lot about the M&D community when a friend's diagnosed, and it became apparent really early that people, when they're diagnosed with M&D, often stop getting visitors. Phone stops ringing, stop getting messages. People find it too difficult.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, two of football's biggest celebrity owners could be about to branch out into another sport. Hollywood stars Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney became co-owners of Wrexham Football Club, you'll remember, back in 2020, and they have completely transformed the club's fortunes and overseen their return to the Football League. Their documentary, Welcome to Wrexham, has led to the team enjoying an international profile on par with some of the Premier League's biggest clubs. Well, now the duo have apparently held talks about buying a stake in Welsh Fire. That's the 100 cricket franchise that is based in Cardiff. It comes as Glamorgan, who own 51% of the club, look for a bidder for the remaining 49%. So could we see Rob and Ryan come to the wicket as investors into Welsh cricket? Well, let's speak to Glamorgan Chief Executive Dan Cherry, who joins us now. Well, Dan, this is potentially very exciting. Who approached who?
I think that the process is being led by the England-Wales Cricket Board at the minute, and I think they reached out and made contact, and yeah, we're hopeful of that Ryan and Rob might be interested and can build on the Wrexham effect that we've seen to massive wins for their North Wales football.
So explain to us how this franchise and bidding process works, because it's quite unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So there are 8 franchises currently playing in the 100 competition, which has obviously been going for the last 4 years. Welsh Fire is obviously a franchise, and there'll be a bidding process over the next few months. And yeah, we're hopeful of attracting kind of interest around from around the world, and hopefully that can benefit the growth of the game in Wales.
Yeah, oh, they could be outbid. Tom Brady's now involved in football as well. I wonder if he knows anything about cricket. But in terms of the big sell, if Rob and Ryan decide to invest in cricket and particularly the 100 competition, what would they get?
Well, I think we've seen the great impact that they've had on Welsh football, and I think we're the only Welsh team that's competing in the 100 competition. So look, they can buy into the huge passion and energy that the Welsh people have for sport, and they could be part of hopefully growing the next generation of young girls and boys who want to pick up a bat and ball.
Yeah, because that's the thing about the 100. It's attracted a new audience to cricket, isn't it? It's the newest format. And just, looking at scenes from the Wrexham Victory Parade when they got promoted, but also like the documentary they're involved in, those kind of eyeballs, an international set of eyeballs on your club would be incredible, wouldn't it?
It would be amazing for us. It would give us an opportunity, hopefully, to do what the guys have done for Wrexham. So build a really strong, passionate fan base and grow interest in the game globally, and hopefully increase, putting Wales on the world map.
OK, well, Dan, we've got everything crossed for you. Let us know how the negotiations go. Of course, there is a bidding process. Let's see how you get on. We hope to catch up again soon. That's Dan Cherry there, Chief Executive of Glamorgan Cricket Club and, of course, Welsh Fire, their 100 team. Well, that's all from the UK Tonight. You can, of course, catch up on all the highlights on our webpage. Just scan the QR code on your screen. Up next, it's The World with Yalda Hakeem. We'll see you tomorrow.